Hey creators, in this tutorial we'll cover how to take high quality images of your artwork with a $0 budget. So we're out here in a park, nice sunlight going on. 3 things you need. 1, obviously your artwork. 2, whiteboard, it's optional. And 3, your smartphone, or if you don't have a smartphone, that's fine. Go get a disposable camera. That's simple. No excuses. So for the voiceover section of this tutorial, Alex and we decided to have a more conversational style instead of just a plain old voiceover. So leave in the comments section below how you feel about this. If you think it's more helpful, let me know. Thanks.
Now, we do recommend that you use a professional photographer when photographing your artwork, but when times are tough and money's tight, sometimes you just have to rely on your smartphone. And this video will help you with the techniques that you need to know to do it.
What's the best case scenario to shoot outside?
Just a big open area, a lot of sun and fair conditions.
So say I have like a watercolor painting or an illustration. How would I photograph that in a park?
You just find a point of direct sunlight and a clean spot on the floor, and make sure it's not too distracting. You place the artwork down, make sure you photograph it without your shadow in it from a direct point of view above the photo. Make sure you're straight on, not too far left or right. That way you'll make sure that you don't have any distortions in the photo. You want it to be straight on so that no keystoning occurs.
Keystoning is a term that we use to describe what happens when we photograph a 2D artwork from the wrong angle. So if you're shooting a 2D piece of work and you're too far below or to the side, you're going to start to notice that the proportions of the piece look off. So if you want to have accurate proportions and eliminate keystoning, you got to make sure that you're straight on with the piece.
Why are you using a foam core board for the background on the ground?
Foam core board's a great look to have behind your artwork because it's completely neutral, completely blank, and it's going to let your artwork stand out on its own.
When we go to take an image of a photograph, what are some issues we may foresee?
Reflections in the glass, poor lighting in general, or mixed lighting, just distractions, things in the backgrounds that don't work with your photo but work against them.
In order to remove reflections, what do you suggest we do?
The best thing you can do to remove reflections, if possible, is remove the glass that's covering the artwork. In most cases, that's the culprit. If that's not possible, or if that doesn't solve your problems, photograph in direct sunlight.
So say we have a piece of artwork that is rich in texture, like a thick acrylic painting. What would you suggest we do for the texture pieces?
For textured pieces, you really want to show off that quality because it's a selling point. It's something that makes the piece unique. A good way to do that is using light. Before you photograph the piece, you want to move it around a little bit, search for the sweet spot as far as the light's concerned. If you have the light at more of an angle, you're going to create kind of peaks and valleys in light and shadow within the surface of the artwork that you might be able to translate into the photograph well. Find an open, non-distracting place to put down your artwork to be photographed. We recommend grabbing a piece of foam core or any kind of blank background to photograph on. It might even be a good idea to get an extremely close-up shot of the artwork to really get the viewer the idea of the texture.
What should we be focusing on as far as the background goes?
You want to make sure that your background is pretty non-distracting. Find a nice wall to shoot against, or a set of stairs or something that's going to complement your work instead of distract from it.
What kind of angles would you suggest artists take of their work?
Just enough angles that you can properly describe the form of the artwork, especially if it's 3D artwork. Think of what the main representation should be, and then how many angles that you need to support the artwork.
What time of day would be ideal for taking these images?
Around 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock are pretty good times to be photographing, especially if it's three-dimensional work.
What are some of the pros of working with a deep background?
If you can find an area that has enough open space that you can really get a good separation between your artwork and the background and have a shallow depth of field so that your artwork is sharp and separates it from the background, that's ideal.
Why using a foam core board would be useful in such a situation?
When you're photographing in bright light, your phone or whatever camera that you're using is going to try to expose for the bright light, meaning that you're going to get some equally intense shadows. And to try to kind of even all that out, a foam core can be a great tool to bounce light back into the dark side of your sculpture. Some phones can blur out the background of a photo a little bit better than others. On my phone, there's a portrait mode that completely blurs out the background of the subject, and I found that working in an open area like this one is great to show off the artwork with that effect. But if your phone doesn't blur the background out and the background is kind of distracting to your image, I'd recommend moving it to a more confined space like a set of stairs.
Now that we moved inside, what kind of issues will we be having with the illustration, especially that it has a glass cover over it?
Some of the challenges that we faced inside were getting a lot of reflections, whether it was reflections of ourselves in our phone or reflections of the lights in the flash. So we found it was a lot easier just to take the glass out altogether, and that really helped us get a clean photo. You're going to want to remember to zoom in about at least 2 times to eliminate any kind of keystoning or distortions in your photograph. For this piece, we once again have a glass cover, so you might want to take that thing off and make your life easier. But regardless, you definitely want to make sure that you're, once again, photographing zoomed in a little bit on your camera app and straight above the artwork. Make sure you're not to the sides, too forward or too back. That way you'll get the most squared up, even, realistic representation of your artwork and save time if you're editing anything, especially.
When we start working with the texture painting indoors, what do we really need to consider when we start working with different lighting techniques?
You're going to want to consider your light direction first of all. Since we're talking about a textured painting, you definitely want to emphasize that texture. Getting a nice directional light can really help you achieve that. Also, an important thing that you're looking for is evenness. If you start feeling like your light source is just too heavy on one side and you have a light side and a dark side, you're going to want to grab at least a second light to kind of even that out.
What would you suggest, shooting on the floor with the foam core board or just mounting it on the wall?
For convenience sake, if you're able to photograph your artwork on the wall, there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes situations aren't always ideal. You definitely want to make sure that you have a neutral color to photograph against. That way that you're not affecting the color palette of your actual artwork. Especially with cell phones, they kind of take in all the color to interpret what kind of exposure to make or what kind of color balance to create. You don't want any kind of unrealistic or harsh casts on your artwork. Also, when you photograph your artwork on the floor, you might find that you have more control over the exposure and things like reflections and other problems that you'll run across on the wall.
Tell me a little bit about the ideal setup for shooting your sculptures indoors.
Shooting indoors is all about control. So I like to use 2 pieces of foam core to make a little sort of box to shoot in. That way we have a blank background and a blank floor, and we can totally focus on the piece that we're trying to describe. You can do this with just one light, or you can add a second one if you prefer. There's a lot of different directions you can go in terms of lighting your sculpture, but I like to try to photograph it in a way that kind of represents it in its true nature, lighting it in a way that you can see every facet of the piece, especially if someone is trying to make a decision about whether they want to buy the artwork or not. You want to make sure that you give a fair representation. You can get a little bit more creative with your lighting too if you want to emphasize certain qualities of the piece. So if it's a dramatic piece of artwork, you can choose to light with a single light to create drama in the actual photo of the artwork. Strong highlights and shadows.
When you're shooting with your iPhone, there's so many different options of different styles. There's portrait, there's landscape, or square, panoramic. Which one would you suggest we use?
I like to photograph my artwork so that I'm free to turn it into something else down the line. So if I have a vertical image of a vertical piece of sculpture, I want to photograph far enough back that I'd be able to turn it into a square format without cropping in on the actual artwork down the line.
What are some key takeaways of the best case scenarios for photographing all these artworks?
In all four scenarios, it seems to be really beneficial to photograph in bright sunlight. For our illustration, our photograph print, and our textured painting, midday sun did the trick. While the sculpture also looks great outdoors, we really liked the control that we had photographing indoors on with a foam core background. We found that it gave it a nice clean studio look, and we enjoyed the control that we had over the lighting.
Hey creators, thanks a lot for watching. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and learn much more at creatorlifestyle.com. I'll see you there.